Last week I set up a vivarium for my new giant shield mantis. I recommend you check that video out if you haven't already. Today I'll be setting up an enclosure for the second mantis of the three, the dead leaf mantis. This one is by far my favorite out of the three. He has a really unique personality that's unlike any other mantis I've kept. I mean, just look at those eyes. What's not to love? I really love this guy and enjoy having him around, but I think we'll both enjoy it more if he has an awesome vivarium. So let's build him one. Like last time, I'll be reusing the front opening 10-gallon enclosures that I made a little while ago. To make it, I removed the bottom of a 10-gallon aquarium, then assembled and installed a window frame mesh lid. After that, I cut a piece of glass, then installed it on the tanks with some silicone. I repeated that on the top and bottom of each tank. I then cut a wooden dowel and made a custom hinge. I attached it to the tank, as well as a handle and some magnets. With all of that done, I had a custom front opening enclosure. First thing we need to do is make a false bottom using some leca. I poured it into the tank in a layer that's about an inch deep. Leca is usually my go-to option for false bottoms like this, as it's very light and absorbs excess water. Anyway, now that the false bottom's in place, I need to make a substrate barrier. For that, I'll use some mesh. I'm using an old piece of mesh that I then put into the tank and folded up onto the edges. This is to ensure that substrate won't get through. With a solid substrate barrier in place, I can add the substrate itself. This is just my typical ABG mix made of 1 part cocoa fiber, 1 part play sand, 1 part reptile bark, and 2 parts sphagnum moss. I added it into the tank and sloped it up towards the back to create depth. The next order of business is the hardscape, for which I have this piece of spider wood with air plants attached to it. As with the last one, this wasn't particularly difficult, but I still enjoyed the scape. This is probably my favorite out of the three. It's very minimalistic and simple, but that's how I like to keep it for mantises. Especially when they're a lot smaller, they can be hard to find inside these big enclosures, so keeping it simple is important. Anyway, now it's time to bring it to life with the plants. These 5 to be specific. Before adding them though, I need to prep them. To do that, I remove each plant from its pot and break up the soil from the roots. I repeat this process for each and every plant, making sure to get off as much soil as I can. You'll see too that the plant I'm prepping now wasn't in the final build. This is because I ended up switching it out with a fern for the giant shield mantis. After removing as much soil as I could, I took them outside and sprayed them down with the hose to remove any excess. I then could proceed to plant the vivarium. I started with this umbrella plant towards the back right of the enclosure. I found these umbrella plants to be a great option for this, as they fill in the space rather quickly and thrive in this environment. I had to adjust it a little bit though to make sure it looked just right. The next plant I added was this fern. I placed it just to the left of the wood. These were a great option to fill in space as well as create ground cover. The third plant I added was this purple waffle plant. I placed it just in front of the wood. This plant made a great option to add a variety in color as well as texture. I finished off the planting by placing this dragon's tongue right in front of the fern. As with the waffle plant, this was also a perfect option to add color and texture. Now it's time to add the fine details, such as leaf litter. I sprinkled it around the enclosure, making sure to cover as much of the substrate as possible. The leaf litter adds a forest floor effect, which in turn makes everything feel more cohesive. To further feed into that effect, I'll add some botanicals. Not a whole lot of them, but a few will bring that nature effect full circle. No technique to adding these, just throwing them wherever, like you would see in nature. With the leaf litter and botanicals in place, I can now move the tank onto the stand. With 2 enclosures done, there's only space for 1 more on the rack. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. Anyways, the last thing I did was introduce the mantis to its new home. From the leaf-covered forest floors all the way up to the branches in the canopy, this tank is truly beautiful. Again, it's a very minimalistic and simple design, but that's how I like to keep it for the mantises. Although you could go all out and make a super detailed vivarium, sometimes the simple way is the better way. I'm very pleased with the end result for this one, and I think the mantis will be as well. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. As I said at the beginning of the video, this mantis is by far my favorite out of the three. He has a very unique personality that I've never before seen in a mantis, and I've kept a few. Usually mantises are laid back and want nothing to do with me, but this guy always wants to know what's going on. Anyways, that's gonna do it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the third and final mantis. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.